Hey there and welcome to Precious Hobby Time. This is the first video of this channel and today I will show you how I built something out of this skull I found at the aquarium store. As a terrain crafter and Necromunda enthusiast, this mechanical skull reminded me at the Warhammer 40k universe and especially at Necromunda. The first thing that comes into my mind is of course the servo skulls that are used in the Warhammer universe to aid in different tasks, but also in the iconography of the whole franchise, skulls are omnipresent, you could say. Take the Necromunda logo, for example. This artwork in particular inspired me at first, or came to my mind when I saw this skull at the store, but I wanted to build something more built into the architecture, more like this artwork here. So in this video we will take this skull that I bought and I will build something like an Archeotek device, or it also has some similarities with a Adeptus Mechanicus shrine for my Necromunda gaming table. Enjoy! This skull has already seen some games, but it was merely used as scatter terrain, and I think with this elaborate sculpt and clean paint job, I think it deserves more of a prominent spot on the gaming table. My initial thoughts were to create a shrine to the Omnissiah, the machine god of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or some piece of lost technology that can be found and salvaged. I think in the end it turned out to be a mix of both, but I stick to the idea of it being a piece of Archeotek, ancient and advanced technology waiting to be found and studied. So I had this oatmeal packaging tubes laying around for some time now, and I think they're optimal to elevate this skull a bit to make it more prominent than just lying on the floor. I cut one of the tubes up to make an opening to add some access terminal later, and also I checked if the skull can sit on the top. The scale of the tube seems to be pretty optimal to hold the skull in place once the build is done. Since the skull is relatively heavy and this cardboard tube has not a lot of strength, I opted to strengthen it more by doubling the layers, but still the weight of the skull will be a problem that I will need to address later, but that is a problem for future me. I 3D printed these access terminals, two of them actually, and one looks like a book in a shrine. I imagine this might be the manual for this Archeotek device and access terminals to it. The files are from Mortarion, if I'm not mistaken. I will link you the creator in the description. Later I will use another 3D printed tile, it's from the same creator and can also be found under this link. Of course the terminals need something to sit on, and so I eyeballed some foundations on XPS foam, which then got cut out with the Proxon thermocut. Of course this would also be possible with only a knife. Here I'm test fitting the terminals and the access points to see if my imagined idea makes sense. Better do it now than later, but I think it seems to go together very nicely. I assembled all the pieces and hot glued them together. Now the fun part starts. Greebling. I think it's not a real word, but what it means is you add stuff until it looks good. For that reason I gathered everything pipe-like and wiry to add. It's supposed to look like a lot of wires and pipes come together from this ancient piece of technology. Maybe it is some sort of distributor where all the electrical power or information is coming together to be rerouted to somewhere else. What I'm adding here are wires from electrical trash and installing lamps, drinking straws, barbecue skewers, tubes in which brushes are delivered. One of the big tubes is from the hardware store, I don't know what it would be for. And we're adding stuff. Still adding stuff. Oh, there's not enough stuff yet. I am making sure to break up every regularity, so I aim for as less symmetry as I can. And so on and so on, adding what looks tube-like, pipe-like and wire-like. That's how it looks so far. Very ugly, of course, since there are so many different materials and colors involved. This will naturally change when we come to the painting stage. At the moment we only have pipes. I imagine that these isolate and protect wires, but it needs some exposed wiring to imply that there is wiring. So I'm still at the adding stuff stage, and now adding wires. Still more stuff to add. Here we have a preview of what it's gonna look like. In the meantime, I thought about how to add the skull to the top. It is not permanently attached yet, but I drilled some holes into the skull to drive through some cable ties. These won't be able to be closed, but I will insert them, glue them and then trim them down. Now it's time to add this piece to a board. For this purpose I trimmed down an old Necromunda board that I've made previously but never really used. The scale of the board is trimmed down so that two of such boards can fit into my showcase next to each other. It's roughly 27 by 27 centimeters, so a tiny bit smaller than the standard Zone Mortalis floor tile. Of course, the backside of this wall is still very empty. In my initial attempt of building and planning the Archeotek Device, I wanted to build some arches and/or murals out of XPS foam for the backside. But I now realized that this would make the terrain piece very slim and too thin for my taste, so I opted for something else. The cloaks of the Adeptus Mechanicus came to my mind and I wondered if I could do something similar here. So I stripped away my previous work of the arches, which were badly executed anyway, and started to trace some XPS foam pieces that would give the structure more bulk. I cut them with the Proxon Thermocut again and dry fitted them. But before I could attach them, I needed to address a problem. The skull that will rest on the top of the structure is relatively heavy, and the whole thing will be quite top heavy and have a lot of weight pulling to the front. So I needed to make sure the structure sticks very strongly to the board, so no long-term damage will arise. So instead of just gluing the structure down how I would have done it otherwise, I had to reinforce it with skewers and toothpicks which were glued in the foam foundation behind the terminals. The structure should now be very strongly attached and is unlikely to fall off. After I glued the bulking bits with hot glue, I also reinforced them with toothpicks again. Now that the basic structure stands, I started to execute my idea for the Mechanicus cloak. For that I took an old piece of fabric that I hoarded for crafting reasons and tried to form my intentional form of the cloak. It seemed like it would work just fine. With the compass I tried to trace where I would need to cut the fabric so it would fit the structure. This doesn't have to be very exact though, because I am opting to have some additional material anyway. The cut out piece was test fitted and it looks like everything is coming together. Obviously I didn't want the cut edges to be as clean cut as they were, so I took out my wire brush and started brushing the edges that I cut to roughen them up and make them look worn and teared. But before I could glue the fabric in place, I had to finish the sides that would face the front before they get covered. I had an idea to use the big tube from before again to make the rest of the board look less empty. So I glued in some more pieces to the board to provide some cover for the fighters that are going to battle for the device. Finally ready to attach the cloak and finish the building process. Mix white glue with water. Soak the fabric in the water, bring most of it out and shape the fabric as desired. After attaching it, I continued to add some more glue-water mixture to the fabric to strengthen it when the glue dries. You can speed up the drying times with a heat gun, but I let mine sit overnight and it dried perfectly. As you can see, the fabric is very stiff when dry. And by the way, here you see the other 3D printed tile I added off camera to provide some more cover and variation to the board itself. As mentioned before, the creator of this file is in the description. To further enhance the strength of the fabric, I covered it with a generous coat of black gesso, just to make sure it is strong enough. You thought we were finished building? Wrong. I had the idea of adding even more tubes, wires, cables and so on. I really like the effect of these pipes containing even more piping and wiring. That's what I really love about this process of building. You think you're moving on, but then you have another idea and you just execute it. And sometimes you have to force yourself to stop so you can finish the project. That's where we are after the building stage. This time it's really done. Or is it? You will see. But for the painting we need to detach the skull once again, since it's already painted. And this here is one of the most satisfying steps of all the crafting. Priming. All the different materials and colors get unified to this light gray color. Okay, we're gonna count that one to the painting phase, but I actually forgot something before priming, which is not a problem at all. I added some texture paste to places that were either too plain and boring, like where the pipe connects to the ground, or where I wanted a hint of rust that has built up over the millennia this device was forgotten. In the next step, all was covered in the base color of chocolate brown, for which I used a rattle can. Afterwards I swapped to the airbrush, and boy oh boy did I have issues today with my airbrush. It clogged, it sputtered, and it nearly cost me my sanity to finish painting. But anyway, with darker browns I painted shadows and brought variety to the brown tones on the board. And with brighter brown tones I painted highlights and gave further variation to the browns used on the board. For the cloak I used Screamer Pink as base color. This color was the worst on this bad airbrush day, and it nearly wouldn't cover the brown below. For the midtones I used Corn Red. And finally, for the highlight, a pure red. After that I refined the paint job of the structure, some more with a rusty orange wash through the airbrush, and some metallics to indicate the metal of some of the parts. Finally, I painted some of the details, pipes and wires, the terminals, skulls, the manual of the Archeotek Device, candles, and as I catched myself starting with cloth texture on the coat, I forced myself to stop painting. You can always add more, but at some point you need to stop, or you'll never be able to finish it. The last step in painting is the oil wash. I took out the black and brown oil paint, thinned it down a lot with mineral spirit, and splotched it all over the piece, with the cloak being the only exception. The wash draws itself into all of the recesses and crevices to strengthen the shadows. This is especially important in the rippled pipe and the piping and wiring in the back of the device. For the rest of the board, it just gives a weathered and old appearance.
Log entry number 846. I have traveled far and wide. I have ventured deep into the Underhive, deeper than many dare to tread. Many dangers have I faced, since my path was filled with perils. But I have finally found one, an actual Archeotek device that is still working. What technological marvels may come from this discovery, I wonder?
So there we have it, the finished Archeotek device. I'm very proud of the end result and I really like how it came out. From a playing perspective, this terrain tile might not be the most exciting one, since the playable space is very limited, but I really love the aesthetic of the piece. What I may be able to add in future is some kind of platform on top of the head. I was playing with the idea of having a wooden platform that is really haphazardly put together as some sort of vantage point, but for now I decided not to put one there, but that may be a project for the future. So the question remains, will one gang be able to claim this Archeotek device for their own, or will conflict arise? Only the future will tell, and maybe you will see the answer to that question in another video. For now, I thank you very much for sticking until the end, and I hope you liked the video, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.